Hi everyone, welcome you all. In our previous videos of Playwright, we have seen how we can test web application, and we have seen how to interact with the different type of web elements. And also we have seen the different features provided by Playwright. So Playwright is also supported API testing. So we can also test REST APIs using Playwright. And for that, Playwright is by default provided a feature called request. And by using that feature, we can perform REST API testing. Now in the today's video, I'm going to show you how we can perform different type of API request in Playwright. Okay, so for that, I'm taking a sample API. So this is basically request and response.in. So this is a web page, and they have provided sample API request and like a list of users, single user, and post request, a create, update, delete. So different type of REST API requests they have provided just for demo purpose. So I'm trying to use them, some of the requests, and I'm going to demonstrate how we can perform this API request, how we can validate response in Playwright. Okay. So for that, I have prepared a small test. There are 4 tests I have taken for 4 different type of requests: get, post, put, and delete. So this is a URL. So through this, we can get the user information or user's customer information, and payload is not required. And response payload, it will return some list of users, and status code is 200. And this is another type of request, post request, through which we can create a new user. So this is the URL we have to use, and we need to also pass the data along with the request. This is called request payload. And once you send this request, once your user is got created, you will get the response like this along with ID and created date. And the status code is 201. And then we have a put request. This is the URL. And whatever the new user is got created, so with this ID, we can update the existing user. So whatever data we provided earlier, the same data we can update, and we get the another response, and 200 is the status code. And finally, we have a delete request. This is the URL. Here we have to pass ID as part of URL, and then there is no need of request payload, and it is because just for deleting the existing request, and 204 is a status code. Okay, so I'm not going to explain the basic stuff, what is API and how it is going to work, all these things. And if you want to learn all those concepts, I will share some of the videos in the description. You can go through and understand the basics of APIs. Okay, so here I'm directly jumping into that API request, and I will show you how we can test these type of requests in Playwright. Okay, so before directly testing this in Playwright, let me show you manually in Postman tool. Now I already have Postman tool. If I look at here, I already created a different request here in the Postman tool. And if I look at here, this is my first request, get request. So here we have to pass the page number. So page equal to whichever page you have passed, it will show you the user information from the page. Now when I send this request, you will get the data like this in the JSON format. This is a one type of request. This will basically retrieve the user information, which are the users are present inside the particular page. Another one is post request. So here we have to send this URL along with the post request, and we have to pass the request body also, name and job. And when you send this request, which will create a new user in the database, and which will return along with the ID and the creation time and data. And then we have a put request, and through which we can update the existing data. For example, here, once I created your post request, it is created the new ID. So new user 438 that I can pass here. 438, and whatever user we created in the previous request, in the post request, we can just pass it here, and this will go and update the record. But when you're updating, we have to pass the payload again. So previously, this is the payload. I'm trying to update the job in the update. So put request, normally we send whenever you want to modify the record or whenever you want to update the existing record. So I'm just changing the job as engineer, and with this particular user ID, when I send this, this is going up, it is going to update the existing record. So this is updated. And after that, we have a delete request. So this is the URL, and along with the ID we have to pass. So currently 438 that I'm going to pass it here. 438. And this is a a URL which is going to delete the record, and here you can see it's 204, no content available. So these are the 4 different type of requests. So now we are going to validate these requests in the Playwright. Okay. So for that, what we need to do is I already prepared a small Excel sheet here, so which contains all the different type of request URLs which we have to use, request payload, response payload, and the status code we want to validate. Now, this is very basic stuff. And initially we will try to understand how we can do this in a Playwright. Later, I will show you different scenarios. Okay. Now go back to VS Code editor. And here I already created API test spec.js. Same configuration. We don't need to do any additional configuration. Just we need to install Playwright and through npm. And if I go back to the package.json, make sure you have Playwright test. So this is the module you have to install. That's the only prerequisite. And this will come along with the Playwright at the time of Playwright installation. Other than this, especially for performing API testing, you don't need to install anything additionally. Okay. Right. So now I already created one new spec file, API test.spec.js. And inside this, I have already imported Playwright test module, test and expect. And these are the different test blocks I have created. For 4 different type of requests, I have created 4 different type of tests. This is for getting users. This is for creating user. This is for updating user. This is for deleting user. So for getting users, normally we send get request. And for creating user, we send post request. For updating user, we send put request. And for deleting user, normally we send delete request. Okay. So here we have another feature called request. So normally when you do web testing, we take page feature. We take the help of page feature, right? Similarly, when you do API testing in Playwright, we will take the help of a request feature. So by using this feature, we can perform. Okay. Now, first we will see how to send a get request, get users. So if I go back to the documentation, so this is the URL which you have to send. And this will basically return all the list of users which are present in the page 2. And status code should be 200. Okay. Now let us try to do. And as I said, we have to take the help of a request feature. Okay. So how to send get request? So to send the get request, simply, it's very simple. We need to access a request feature like this, request and dot. You can just call methods. You can see all methods are there. Let's say get method is available, put is available, and then post is available. Okay. And then delete is also available. All the HTTP methods are available in the request feature. So in this, we just call the get. And when you call the get, here we have to pass the URL. So whatever URL we want to pass, you can just specify here. So currently this is the URL I'm going to pass as part of the request, get it. And now here I'm pasting this. That's it. So one single statement. So this will go and hit the server. It will send the get request. Okay, but how we will get the response? So once you send this get request, it will give the response that we can store in a variable. I'm creating one const variable. I'll call it as a response. Now I'm stored this particular response, whatever the get request I sent, the response I have stored in this variable. So if you want to print the response in my console window, by default, it is returning JSON form and JSON format. If you want to just print this, I can say console.log. And I wait for response. And once you get a response dot, you can call one method called JSON. So this will return the JSON response. So whatever response we captured here, that response will be printed in the JSON format in our console window. Now, what is the status code we want to validate here is 200. And here I can put one I can put some assertion. I can say expect and response dot status. Here from the response, whatever things we want to validate, you can just put like body, headers, so status text, URL. So many things we can validate. For now, I'm just using status. And what could be the status? So the status should be 200. So I can say dot to be 200. So this is a simple validation point. So later in the upcoming videos, I will show you different type of validations, but this is very basic. I'm just saying only validation of a status code. Okay, simple. So I'm just sending the get request, getting the response in and getting the response in a variable. Then I'm just printing the response in my console window if you want to see the response. And then I'm validating the status code. Okay. Now let us run the test, simple test. So here we don't need any payload because this is basically get request. We want to retrieve the data from the server. We are not going to send any data. We are just sending the URL. Okay. Now I want to run only this test. I can say only. All right. So rest of them still we have not implemented. So I'm just running only this particular test, get request, HTTP request. Now go back to terminal. And in the terminal, I'm going to run my test. You can see here, clear. And this is a simple command. Here we are not going to launch any browser. We are not going to work with any type of browser. Okay. So npx playwright test, and in the test folder, my test name is API test.spec.js. Simple test I'm going to run. Okay. Now press enter. Yes, my test is got passed. So if I look at here in the console window, it is displayed all the response. So this is the response which we have got from the request. Okay, so this is the command we have executed. One worker is assigned to one test, and by default it is using Chromium internal. So get users request, and this is the response in the JSON format. Page number 2, and a total 12 users are there, and other information is got displayed. So my assertion is also got passed. So this is a simple way we can send get request, HTTP request. Okay, now let me show you how we can create a new user by sending post request. Okay, so when you send a post request, we need to pass request payload. So request payload in the sense we need to pass the body also. We need to pass the body. That means we need to pass name and job. Currently, this particular API is required data, name and job, right? So let us see how can we achieve this. Post request. Go back to VS Code editor. Now I'm going to execute another test. I'm going to implement another test. This is basically for what? Post request, creating the user, the database. So again, I'm getting the request fixture, and in this, I'm going to implement something. So as a first step, we need to execute the post request through the request fixture, right? So what I can say, await request, we have to take help of request dot post. So post. In this, we have to pass the URL. That's the first thing. So in the single or double quotations, I will put this URL. This is my URL for post request, and go back, and here this is a URL, and not only URL. So along with this URL, we should pass the data also, right? So we should not close this bracket. So what we have to do is, along with this URL, put some comma, and the data also we need to pass. So along with this URL, we should also pass the data. So how to pass the data? In the curly braces like this, we need to put 2 curly braces, and here inside the curly brace, we should say data, and again curly brace. So here we need to specify. So this is one parameter of post request, and all this is one another parameter. So this is one parameter. First parameter is a URL. The second parameter is what? Data. Okay. So here we started the curly brace, and this is actual data. So in this, we have to provide the data in key value pair. So currently it is taking name and job. So I'm just keeping that in the double quote. This is the attribute, and the value is, I'm saying Kumar. So this is a key and value, and another data. This is one data, and then I'll pass job also. I can say job, and the value is what? I can say trainer. Okay, so this is colon, not comma. Okay, so this is the data. So this is the first URL we are sending, and after this is the data, and along with the data, if you want to pass headers, we can simply pass. Okay, so this I can put in the same line. So this is the data, comma. So data is over. So once the data is over, now the next thing will start. That is headers. Okay, so we need to pass headers, and headers colon, again one more curly brace. So this is a syntax case. Okay, when you send a post request, this is the URL we have to send, comma, and this is the data. I can keep on another line. So this is the data from here to here, and now I am passing the headers. So this is another one, headers. How to pass headers? You can simply say accept. Okay, so accept, and then colon, and here we can specify what type of data we are sending, in the which form of, I can say application slash, this is MIME type, you can specify application slash JSON. Okay, so this is the URL which we have to send along with the post request, and then this is the data, and this is a header part. And if there is any authentication, that also we can specify in the same section, right? So header is also done, and then we are closing this request completely. So this is a complete method. Here we have to close. So what are the things we are passing here? We are sending the post request URL, comma, we are sending the data. Along with the data, we are sending the headers. So the data and headers, everything should be part of the one single bracket. Okay. And then we are closing this. If you have confusion here, you can put syntax like this. So this is a data. So comma, and you can put in single line also, no problem. So name equal to Kumar and job equal to trainer. So this data is over. Okay, so my data is done. So this is closing curly brace data, and now headers. And this is another parameter. So this is header, accept application slash JSON. So if I look at this, there is no confusion in the syntax. Done. Okay, so now this curly brace is got closed here, and this particular bracket is got closed here. So this is how we have to send a post request. So suppose tomorrow, if you want to add any cookies or any authorization, you can just add them into this curly braces, right? Now, so this is a post request. So once you send a post request, this will give you the response, right? So we have to store the response in a variable. Here I'm creating one variable called const response. So once you send a post request, we will get the response here. Once we get a response, we can validate. So now here I'll keep some assertions. And before keeping the assertions, I can just print the response. How can we print the response? Simple. I can say console.log await for response. Okay, dot JSON. So this will print the response. This will actually print the response. So once we get a response in this, we are printing the response in the console window. And not only this, if you want to validate, we can put the assertion. I can say expect. Simple, I can say expect. And I want to verify the status. I can say response dot status. And it should be, I can say to be 201, because this is a post request. So especially when you're creating a new user, the request, the response status should be 201. Status code should be 201 for post request most of the time. So I can say this is one validation. And then again, suppose when you send this particular URL, or when you send this post request, which will return the response here, right? So the response contains what? Many things. If I go back to the response of this post request, we got a name, job, whatever we provided, that is also part of the response. Additionally, it will give you ID and creation time. And this ID we required to send another type of request. Suppose tomorrow, if you want to update existing user, or if you want to delete existing user, we need this particular ID, which is automatically generated by the request. So how to capture that ID and store into the variable? So for that, what you need to do is, after putting this assertion, I will store the response in a variable. So for that, I'm creating one variable here, because this ID is required for another request. So I can just take one variable, res equal to await from response dot JSON. Okay, so this will give you the whole JSON response into the variable, right? So now from this variable, from this response, I'm extracting ID. Simple. Okay, that I'm going to store in a variable. So I'm going to create one global variable, which is commonly required for all the tests. So here, before starting the test, I'm creating one var variable, var called as a user ID. Because this variable, I am going to refer in multiple tests. So especially in the post request, once you created your new user, giving the response, and from the response, I'm verifying the status code. And not only this, I'm capturing the ID from the response. How can we capture? From the response.json, this will return the response. From this response, I'm capturing the ID. So res.id that I'm going to store in this particular variable, user ID. Okay, that's it. So we have done this test. So we have verified the status code and also printing the JSON response. Not only that, from the JSON response, we are getting the ID, and that I'm going to store in the user ID variable, because this variable I'm going to refer in another request. Okay, this is the create user test. Fine. Let me save it and then execute only this one. So later we will execute all the tests in one shot. So now I'm trying to execute only this one. Create user request. Okay. Fine. So let me save the file and then execute. Go to the terminal. Clear it. Then execute the same command. Okay. Now my test is successfully passed. So this is the ID which is got generated. 426 is got generated. This is a dynamically generated. So the same ID we have to use for updating existing record and also deleting the existing record or user. So this is the data we have passed. Fine. So now let us implement another test. Update user. So far we have seen two different type of HTTP request. One is for getting user. We have sent get request. For creating user, we have sent post request. Now I'm going to show you update user. Okay, again, same process. And whatever we have done for the create user, same thing will be repeated, but slightly it will change. Okay, so this is for update user request. So what are the things I'm going to change? Just observe here. Instead of post request, the URL is same. If I go back and see the document, so here for post request, this is the URL which we have used. Okay, this is the URL which we have used, but in the put request, we have to additionally pass this ID along with the URL, and we have to modify the data also. The payload, request payload, we have to modify, and whatever ID we captured from the previous request, from the post request, we have to pass that ID, user ID, along with this put request. Okay. Now that is the only one change. So instead of post, I'm sending the put method. I'm calling the put method. This is for update user. Okay, so this is the common URL, and along with this we have to pass ID also, right? But we have saved this ID in this variable in the previous request. So how can we access this variable in this URL request? Simply you can say this is one request, and you can say slash and use a plus operator. Okay, plus the variable name user ID. This is basically do the concatenation. This is the actual URL and concatenating with the user ID, which we are getting dynamically at the runtime. So once you run the previous request, post request, you will get this user ID. Okay, this is a link. Now, what type of data we want to pass? So slightly I will change this. I can say here I can simply change as an engineer. So now I have updated the job of the existing user, and header exactly the same. So if you want to print the console, if you want to print the data in the console window, you can do it. And expectation, what is the status code for update user is again 200. So 200 is the status code update. And here we don't need to store any ID, so we can just remove this part. So this is our update user. We are sending the put call, and here appending the user ID in the URL, and data we are passing request data and errors along with the same thing, and we are printing the response, and also we are verifying the status code should be 200. This is update user. Okay, now after that immediately I will also implement delete user. This is very simple, and after that we will execute all of them together. So delete user. So how we can do that? Again, same process, await request fixture, and from that we have to call delete, and simple we have to pass only URL. So delete URL. So this is a delete URL. So this is a delete URL. So let me get this. Now pass it here. And again, this ID should come from the variable, right? So whatever the user we have updated here, whatever user we have created above, the same user ID we need. So that same variable, again, I'm referring here. We are not hard coding this data. We are just getting the value from the user ID. That's it. So this particular statement will delete the request. And once you delete it, we'll get the response in a variable. I'll create one variable const response. And simply you can verify the status code. So what is the status code after deletion? 204 is a status code. We do not have any request payload. We do not have any response payload, just a verification of the status code. So simply you can say expect, and from the response, get the status code, and that should be 204. This is our simple status code. Okay. So with this, we successfully sent all HTTP requests. Now let me go through once. The first request we are sending get request, which will return all the users which are present inside the page number 2. This is my first test. Now the second test is for what? Creating the new user, which is basically post request. And we are storing the ID in a variable so that we are referring the same ID in the next test. And this is for update user test, and the same ID we are referring, whichever we created in the previous test. And we are modifying the data here and verifying the status. After that, delete user, and we are sending the request URL along with the user ID, and then we are verifying the status code. These are the 4 different test HTTP requests we have sent. So now let us try to execute everything. But before execution, we have to take care of one thing. So by default, Playwright will execute all the tests in the parallel mode. So when you run this test parallel mode, there will be a problem. Suppose before executing this create user, if it is executed update user, then it will become a problem, right? Because before creating, how can we update the user? It is not possible, right? So the user ID we cannot get. So this is a problem you will get when you run the test parallelly, because there is a dependencies there. So we have to make them serial execution. So what we can do is we have to go to the configuration file playwright.config.js, and here you can see something called in the module.export test directory. Along with this, you can see fully parallel. So by default, this option will be true like this, because by default Playwright will execute all the tests in the parallel mode. Okay, so you have to make this as a false, so that in whichever order we created all the tests, they will execute in alphabetical order by default. Okay, so we can just make it false. Parallel execution, make it false. This is only one thing we have to do. Okay, and that's it. So workers, and if you go back to the projects level, I'm currently in enable only one worker, which is Chromium, and rest of them are commented. Okay, so this is the most important. We have to fully parallel should be false, because there is dependent tests are there. So once you have done it, save the configuration file. Now save the test file also. So let me try to execute now. This is for get request, this is for create user, this is for update user, and this is for delete user. Okay, now save the file once again, go to the terminal, and now execute the test. Clear? Now I'm running the test. Perfect. Now 4 tests are executed, all 4 are got passed. Fine. Let's look at the report now. I can execute this command npx playwright show -report. So this is open the report. Now you can just observe here, this is the order they have executed, exact same order. Get users, all the steps are successfully executed. And if you just go back, okay, now this is the test, get user test. If I go back, and this is for create user test, executed successfully. And this is for update user, all steps are executed. And this is for delete user, this is also successfully executed. Okay, so this is simple, a Playwright default report. If you want to generate HTML report, still you can generate. So in the previous videos, I have already shown you how to generate the HTML report. Just we need to add one entry in the configuration file. right? If I go back here, list HTML, JUnit, so HTML is already part of it. So that is already generated HTML report in the test results. If I go back to the, not here, I can just see here. Okay, we need to provide that command. Okay, so here it is generated JSON and JUnit report. If I look at here, result.xml is got created, result.json is also got created. So these are the two additional reports which are created. HTML report is also created. It should be present somewhere. Okay, so this is the one Playwright report. Under this Playwright report, HTML is got generated. So you can just open this. You cannot directly open. So you can just copy this relative path and copy path and then open in the browser. You can just go back to the browser and same report, whatever we have seen through Playwright is the same report. It is open, this same HTML report. Okay, this is a default report provided by Playwright. Fine, so this is how we can simply test REST APIs in Playwright by using this request feature. So get request, then post request we have seen, then put request for updating user, and then delete request. Okay, so that's all for this video. In the next video, we will see some more options in the API testing. So thanks for watching.